This is the older 1970 original ct70 we had. Since I had the other bike almost completely together, I decided to crack into this one. Previously, I had to replace the front fork, um, and you can see here I replaced the rear shocks, put the new wheels and tires off the other bike onto it. And here I'm trying to get this gas tank out, because the gas tank that was in it, while the rest of the bike is pretty fine, the only other part of the bike that was super rusty was the exhaust, which I was planning on reusing on this 125 motor because it would be large enough for it. But it was rusted. The inside of this tank is rusted. Most of the frame and everything else just had surface rust for the most part. But I take this tank out and I had to take all this wiring out as well. I'm switching this motorcycle to a 6-volt system, so all this wiring will be like completely removed and just taken out of the bike completely. Um, Here again, my previous disdain for the gas tanks in these motorcycles is being hard to remove. Um, and here is where I try to do something I had previously been told many times that was a good idea to do, which was to put hardware inside the tank along with some vinegar here and shake it around. And I didn't really have much success with that. And what I ended up doing, I didn't really film it, was I ended up taking toilet bowl cleaner that had a considerable amount of hydrochloric acid inside, and I diluted it and let it sit in the tank overnight, and it nearly ate away all the rust with no shaking involved at all. It was really great. Here's the previous key switch that was in this motorcycle. I thought I recorded me putting the new one in, but this one is having to be removed because, well, we're going to the 6-volt system, but also this one needed to be removed originally anyway because the key that was in it got stuck in it several years ago. As you can see, this Honda was kind of beat up and wasn't exactly appreciated entirely. But yeah, I removed it, and one of the things I also thought I had recorded but I didn't was the hole that the key this goes into has a little notch in it that only allows the ignition switch to go in it a certain way. I ended up having to take a Dremel and get that notch out. After I got the notch out, it went in just fine. The hole was basically the same size, but it had a little keyed notch on it that only allowed the ignition switch to go into it in that one position. And then you see here, this was like all tied together in a weird way and kind of isn't factory to begin with, but I ended up just taking all of it and cutting it with some wire cutters because I didn't want to bother wrenching it out and everything properly. And again, all the wires on this bike are getting refreshed completely anyway, so as well as this brake cable. Weirdly enough, the new one shouldn't have a brake cable that goes to this spot. And then here's me installing the engine by myself, the new shiny 175cc engine. This engine it's pretty much brand new. I was having troubles, like it ran, but the carburetor or something was weird, but I got a new carburetor for it. And excuse my bad form for putting this in, but I really couldn't think of any better way to put this in with what I currently had. But I think the bike's starting to look really good because I think the paint that was on it was kept in really good condition after it sat in the basement this whole time. This bike has still barely been out of this basement since I started working on it, but I think all this nice new shiny chrome along with the paint looks really nice. I'm leaving a lot of the dents and stuff in it, mostly because I want it to look like not like exactly a rat rod, but like a kind of patinaed look. And the paint is still in really good condition, so it's kind of weird. But I think it would be like really cool if I just like leave it as it is with completely new refresh parts. I think that would allow the bike to look exceptionally well, in my opinion, as far as everything goes, because it already looks really good. And the paint that's on this bike, one of my problems with the replica is on my working on it, the paint that's on the replica is very soft, where a lot of the paint on this old ct70 that's been on there for years is a lot harder and a lot better quality paint. And if you're getting a replica, like um, everything basically comes off one and fits onto the other just fine. Fitment's not a huge deal, but as far as the quality of a lot of the items go, is definitely different. Um, it's not like you're buying an item that doesn't fit as much as you're buying an item that uh, just isn't good quality, in my opinion. Um, I'm sure this engine is fine. Like it runs, everything does its job well. But you can see like the paint's really soft. The welds on the exhaust look really bad, and a lot of things similar to that as far as issues go. Um, and I've seen a lot of people who buy the replicas and build them really well, but you hardly ever see them keep the original paint because the original paint is so awful. So if you were to ever buy one of the replicas, keep that in mind that the paint is really bad. And here's an issue I ended up having was I fed the wiring harness through the frame after I plugged in uh, after I had installed the ignition switch. It'd probably be easier to install the wiring harness first and then do the ignition switch, because you'll see here in a second what I ended up having to do was one-handed, like halfway through the frame of the bike, and like clip the pins together for the wiring harness and the ignition switch, because it would be easier to go ahead and clip it to the wiring harness and then install it than install it and hit it to the wiring harness, because I had to one-handed in the dark install that or clip it together, which it only took me a minute, but I could see it being frustrating for someone, and I could have uninstalled it and changed it, but and then here I'm going through and going ahead and clipping a lot of stuff together that I know will work, so I can start like eliminating stuff that I need to do off my list of things to do. Also, my poor Yamaha FZ1 in the background. This has been giving me all sorts of issues lately, which is what you get when you buy a used piece of shit stunt bike. Do not recommend unless you're willing to, unless you're a masochist person. And then here's me also continuing my masochism as to not uninstall the key switch and instead fumble around in the dark until I plug it in. And then here's like one of the things I'm going ahead and plugging in as well is this CDI box. I think I'm not sure what it's called, but it controls the ignition. But here's the plug that comes off the motor, and it comes in a 6-pin plug usually, and you can see here that I had the neutral switch put into that 6-pin plug, because I think it's weird that they have 6 wires there that come off of the same area, but they don't run them through the same block, weirdly enough. And so one of the things I did was I went ahead and ran the neutral switch into that 6-pin block, because only 5 slots were used. And so here in a second, you're going to see me basically doing the same modification to this wiring harness, where I had to do the same thing of putting the neutral wire for the wire on the wiring harness side. I have to put it in that block, and it's weirdly enough, it doesn't reach enough. It doesn't have enough distance to reach to the block properly. And so one of the things I'll end up having to do is like mess with it a little bit more. I need to get a proper tool for pinning as well, because I keep doing pinning, and I have a wire crimping tool that kind of works, but the way it's made is really hard to get into a lot of these areas that I'm working on these things at. And here you can see the paint really close. I've barely even washed this thing, and the paint still looks brand new at an upper close look. And then the ct70 right there on the side, still on the badge on the right, is still perfectly intact. And another funny thing about this bike is that it has BMX stump pegs attached to the rear swing arm, which I think is very funny. Um, but yeah, basically the last thing I do here is just fix this um, 6-pin plug. It's just a modification I do, and I would recommend because um, I just think it's kind of stupid that you'd have a 6-pin plug with only using 5 pins with a straight wire beside it. But